I work at JLL. JLL are one of the leading real estate consultancy businesses on the globe. We've got 90,000 staff. We've got just over 200 offices. We are a Fortune 500 company. Our turnover last year was $16.3 billion US. We are very, very focused on the industrial logistics side throughout the globe. We have it's one of our major sort of service lines, if you like. What we are seeing at the moment, and obviously you can see that I hope you got the impression that I'm quite passionate about my topic, my markets. But we've just created a global urban logistics group that is headed up by our chairman of industrial logistics, Craig Meyer, in the States. I'm the representative for the UK, and for us in the UK. We've got 55 brokers throughout the UK in 10 offices. But what we have done, we have created a city logistics group, which all came with me. Not my wife wasn't with me in Singapore. I just hasten to add, although she would have liked to be. But I did bring my colleagues from the City Logistics Group. That's agents, that's capital markets, that's research, sustainability, supply chain consultancy. So we're providing a sort of hopefully a bit of a one-stop shop type service, for our occupier and our developer clients.
Great, thanks, Ingo.
Yes, many things. My name is Ingo Steves. I'm since 20 years in logistics development. I started my little career with Deutsche Bank and Warburg. Then I was with Prologis. One colleague of mine is in the audience, Ulrich Wörner. Gazeley has a very good history. We were with Walmart since 2007, sold then to Dubai World, then sold to Brookfield, and from Brookfield to GLP. We are now the industrial developer GLP. GLP is the number 2 in logistics worldwide. We have been the number 1, but on Friday we sold a platform to our guys from Blackstone, and this was the biggest private equity deal ever on real estate for 2 billion euros. And we are absolutely excited about logistics and what's going on in the sector. I think we are right now in the beginning of everything. If you compare that to the menu, I think we at the apparative, it will be happening a lot. And that what John Langlassalle did as a research, it has done, is quite exciting. And it's always has the input in our IC papers, what kind of research we have done. Thank you very much for this.
Great, Buddy.
Yeah, thanks. Buddy Roes, I work for a company called Logicor. We own 621 logistics buildings in Europe, in 17 countries, over close to 14 million square meters. We've been built up by Blackstone, as just mentioned, who are now still our investor, and our objective is to facilitate and grow the logistics sector with providing, as is what it is, cubic meters of air for you to store goods. To myself, I've been in the logistics sector for almost 17 years now. Real estate background is retail, and to me the light came when I was walking through one of the logistics centers probably around 2000, seeing the same customers that I was seeing in my shopping centers, with one big difference. They didn't present the goods as nicely as they did. It was just hanging there, which is basically what everyone knows. If you go to a department store, you see the same goods hanging there as well. So for me, it was very clear that retail is going to be not longer the future, but warehousing and logistics is going to be the future for retail. That's when I made the decision to join, and I have never regretted.
Great, Raimund.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the occupier here on the panel. I'm working with Zalando, being the vice president for corporate real estate. I consider myself as a digital native because I joined 1999 Amazon in Europe. At this time, nobody had any idea, including ourselves at the time, what this is going to be in the next 20 years. It was really an exciting journey. But this has taught me, how to see the world, also being in this privileged position that I had quarterly business reviews with Jeff Bezos in the early times, who is really one of the most inspiring guys, and even working for Zalando, which is a great company. And I made the decision wisely why to join them, because I think it's really the future for fashion in Europe, and it's a European fashion online player, the biggest actually. But however, Jeff Bezos will be always an inspiration, because the way he thinks and thinks about the customer, and that's the most important thing, start with the customer and work backwards. I think that's the main mantra. If everyone considers or keeps this in mind, then you should be successful.
Okay, good. Let's now that we all know one another, let's start with you, Raimund. We've seen there from Andy some of the trends that he's picking up from the trips that he's seen. We've also seen the UK has obviously been one of the bigger growth areas within Europe for e-commerce. When you're looking towards, I suppose, the key trends that are influencing the future for you, what are you seeing as an occupier?
I think what Andy mentioned is right. By the way, there's one correction, Andy. You mentioned this building in Munich, and your Magazino. Magazino is not Amazon, it's Zalando. So we invested in Magazino. So just this one. But however, everything was on the spot. I think the multi-level is one of the vertical is one of the biggest trends. Maybe not as easy as the industry sees it currently, because you have these big ramp buildings, copying a little bit or stacking normal logistic buildings, having the Singapore or Hong Kong examples. What is certainly something what is coming, but there will be also some different types of e-commerce logistics centers where you have a completely different setup. You don't need the ramps, you just have 4 floors like Amazon is doing it, and we have also more and more buildings with multiple mezzanines or peak towers, which is multi-level. And it's a couple of trends which actually amplify, these multi-story buildings. One is shortage of land, scarcity of land, what is definitely a big thing, particularly in cities. Then scrutiny of scarcity of labor, because it also becomes more and more difficult to find someone, and automation. And these 3 trends, influence each other. Because you have to go closer to the city, you don't find labor, then you have to automate, and with automation you also have a different setup, that you have a better cube utilization and not this pallet racks anymore. So everything is pretty much in the 3 meter, maybe 4 meter minimum, and that requires again a different setup. So, but that's definitely the multi-level city logistics and last mile challenge. That's probably the biggest trends together with automation.
Okay, good. And Buddy, in terms of your role there as owning, managing that real estate, I suppose, how are you going to deal with the things that Raimund is looking at, the demands of the occupiers for you in terms of the real estate component?
When we were preparing for the speech, I was also thinking of what are these typical big mega trends, and to me it was actually something that sounded like Liverpool Champions League's winner being the labor of Liverpool, being the championship as computing power and how quickly we can do, so automation as a consequence. We talked already about the land, which I think is, in all honesty, the biggest driver, and being an owner of the big units that we already have make us probably feel slightly more comfortable than the ones who are depending on growth for development, because at least we have space available. And the last one was basically the winning, as in Wi-Fi interconnection, and how this is gonna change. And I think it's actually then taking one step back, our way how we consume goods, and hopefully as a learning experience, how we also then start to change our maybe distribution behavior, and instead of having zillions of goods stuck in a warehouse lying around until someone orders them, I'm making a big bet on Amazon, knowing that I want to order this type of good in 6 months, so they can start doing the production shipping it to me, and just when I figure out that I want it, it's already there.
So the intelligence is going to be at the front end in a way for that.
I hope so. Because I don't think, to be fair, going higher and higher and higher and higher might be a nice song, but it's not going to be a solution from a personal point of view for an environment having this as creating building density or having more big boxes around. So I hope that artificial intelligence is going to grow our knowledge.
Okay, all right, good. Ingo, let's just pick up one that has come in, which is in terms of the sort of development cycle. How much time should be assumed from land search, getting licenses, to when a building will be ready? Because I think that's interesting in terms of that. What's your view on that?
Our DNA is purely being a developer at the moment, because at the moment it's absolutely the time for harvesting returns to be a developer in that cycle. If you look at the development cycles, is that you need to have a land bank in place. Means you need to have the capital that needs to be secured to have land banks, for example, in Northern Europe. We are doing that quite well. We have bought in the last 18 months, I think, 1.5 million of square meters in Northern Europe, means in the Benelux and in Germany. And we're looking, especially because we are very customer-centric, at the big A's which are here in operating in North Europe. Amazon, for example, we are the top developer of Amazon. And what are the movers and shakers for Amazon? Please correct me if I'm wrong. Raimund, you have much more experience. These are the e-fulfillment centers. These are the 100,000 square meter big boxes. These are the sorter centers, and these are the last mile logistics centers. As you know, if you would like to make your business plans, it's always being acquired by GLP now. It's always like you need to triple your plans. Then I think you need to be, as a developer, concentrating where can you make the business. And this is, for example, e-fulfillment center. E-fulfillment center, from our point of view, are very interesting. And I remember, Raimund, when we had the discussion with our former owner, Brookfield, about what is the design for logistics space in Europe. Is everything the standard, as we have seen the last 10 years? That means a clear height of 10 meters, that means a truck space of 35 meters, that means an office space which is below 5% in comparison to logistics space. We say at the moment no, because we are listening carefully to the Zalandos, to the Amazon guys. If the lease length is like 10, 15 or 20 years, we are very happy to have the building design Amazon would like to develop us. The next one is coming to the market. I think that is Alibaba. They have a different point of view in respect of real estate. They are more supply chain, software, third-party logistic driven. It's interesting how that might be changed from their point of view in Europe. Coming back to your question, yes, land banking is very important. Then you have, if you are very fast with the building permit authorities and the documentation is ready, steady to go, you have 3 months of getting a building permit, and then we as Gazeley are known that we can deliver with the right partners a building very fast, 5 or 6 months, and then you can make your seasonal business. Just to give you one example, Raimund, for your ex-employer Amazon, we had agreed in December having a robotics center in Hamburg. On the 1st of January, we had the first column in place, and in May 2017, Amazon was already operating in that building. So it means only a 5-month time frame when we were delivering our building to the customer. That is quite skyrocketing from our point of view.
May I just say one thing, first of all, you should never say with the customer in the room, it's time for the developers now or for the service providers.
Yep.
So it's always
Agree.
customer focus means customer is in the focus. But I know what you meant. But maybe also one clarification from my side, because especially on this fair, transport and logistics, there are many freight forwarders, other companies. Buddy and I, we just attended the ULI Logistic Council in Europe. We had interesting discussion, realizing that there are the two worlds. Our fast-moving world of e-commerce, where you just turn around the warehouse in 3 weeks, and then you have someone from the old freight forwarders, and they turn a pallet 8 times a year. And that's probably one of the things that this kind of buildings, like in Singapore, and that's probably Buddy's point, saying these things probably will not happen in the future anymore. That you can afford a top city location, even on 20 floors, just for this kind of replenishment. So this has to be optimized, and that will come with supply chain automation, that you just have more just in time, and it comes into the city. But that's a very important point that you have to distinguish. There's the e-commerce world, there's the spare parts world, there's the freight forwarder world, and there's the normal shopping supply. And all these, businesses have different requirements. So you cannot say there is one solution fits all.
Agree, fully agree, and I think it's, again, the e-commerce business in itself is probably, as we all seen, the quickest growing from that perspective, and at the same time, I also think it's the one that is the most eager to experiment and to find new ways and see how they can do things quicker. Saying that, I still think that, as a lot of people would say, these are changing environments and this is all. In all fairness, I think this business is used to having changed environment forever since it was invented. So sometimes we're over-exaggerating a bit and say, so the future is going to be, the future is going to be different. Sure, because the majority of the operators that we have are keen to learn and keen to understand. And if you can survive a business on the basis of a 2% profit margin, I think you need to be agile and you need to be clever about what you do with your goods. So maybe as a defense for the customers in what I would say, the older version, I mean, they're clever as well, so don't underestimate them. And they will tell how the future is going to look. And if I speak to them, one of the things we always will hear, and I think, if we can do everything on one level, yes, please. But if it doesn't work, then we have to go up. And we've been building automated systems since the 70s or the 60s, and they were around, and everyone tested them and said, yeah, sometimes it works. Depends a bit on how quickly you want to move your goods, and they also dealing again with their customers. So, in a way, I think it's fair to say, we like our customers and try to understand and can only underwrite what basically Raimund is saying. Everyone has a different type of business with a different profile. And that's what means you need to be, also as a landlord, we need to be and remain agile to better understand how we can basically help you help us. Because that's ultimately what it is. If you make money, you're going to pay the rent. It's as simple as that. It's not rocket science, unfortunately.
Can I just add that, Buddy, talking about some of the e-commerce operators and them being more agile, I think they're becoming a lot smarter. And what we're finding now is, the customer demands are so strong now. You've got the younger people coming through. I'm in my 50s. I didn't grow up with us just going on your phone and expecting to get a CD or whatever, or DVD. CD, that shows you how old I am. A vinyl record to arrive the next day. My kids are 16 and 19. They expect things immediately, and I think that where we're finding in London at the moment is that some of the real major companies who are the e-tailers, I call them, are now looking at all sorts of weird and wonderful ways to be able to get their goods to the customer in as short a time as possible. So they're now looking at redundant car parks, basement car parks. They're looking at car parks beneath hotels. We've got in London, and I know in many other cities, some real restrictions on. We've got congestion charge, we've got ultra low emission zones. So cars are not coming into the city as much as they used to. So car parks are now, with those basement car parks that are 10 floors subterranean. As long as they can actually get their goods in and out. I know, for instance, that Amazon have been looking at some opportunities in central London at the moment. We've been working with DPD recently, who are quite innovative in terms of how they can get their customers' goods to the market really quickly, and they are now looking at redundant office buildings, redundant retail units, because let's face it, the growth of e-commerce has meant that the high street, particularly in the UK, has really suffered. So they are now being repurposed as centres for deliveries. So there's a whole raft of new ideas that are coming through, which aren't your standard warehouse, 12-metre high warehouses. They are looking at opportunities right in the centre of the city now. So I think it's quite exciting. It's quite innovative, and for instance, I know this sounds quite boring, but we have actually done an analysis of all the vacant car parks in zones 1 and 2 in London at the moment, because it's unbelievable how much is not happening below ground that could do. So they will be repurposed for the e-tailers.
May I? Because I say you said something nicely, which I would like, because you said your kids, like my kids, they kind of want the stuff now. I think I would adjust that and saying they're expecting the stuff now, and that's their mindset. At the same time, everyone wearing a Fitbit and an account, I would say just, if you want it now, get your up, walk to a shop, go buy it there, and walk back. That's probably very old-fashioned, but if you want it, it's there. And I think, again, we're tech people. We got, in the meantime, used to doing everything like this. That's very convenient, but it's not going to be a solution for logistics unless we get this one piece that we ordered through the telephone. Then I think we got a great way forward. But until that moment, I think, yes, and I see absolutely your point is, which is a good story for all the department stores that we have becoming more and more vacant. Because guess what you can do in a department store? You can hang goods there, and you can actually, which is basically what they did before. So it's, there's a future for warehouse and department stores. I'm not sure how my investment committee is going to look when I come and offer them and said, okay, I've got this great idea. This is a new warehouse, hit location, and by the way, it's a department store. Or even better, it's a car parking. It's like, okay, great. Well, how's that going to work? But I agree. Let's make use of whatever we think is available. And I know that the logistics sector has always done so. They didn't move in 50,000 square meters per se. We were just catching up with some of the people I know from the audience sitting and said, 10 years ago, boys, if you had a building of 30 to 50,000 square meters, I was like, whoa, if that becomes vacant. Right now, if I speak to customers, just typically not e-commerce guys, but really they say, standard, probably between 50 and 70,000 square meters. So we've also developed into becoming bigger, more flexible, and yes, now we call it urban logistics. I think it's a nice name for something that was already existing, because at a moment in time, people realize that you can't get goods out of your big warehouse into the city by not transporting it.
It's an interesting point, and there's quite a lot of questions coming in. One of those is particularly on that difference between the sort of, if you're looking at smaller inner city logistics along with the bigger boxes around the periphery. How do you see those as working together or in combination, Raimund? And the other question that I want to pick up as well with you, Ingo, is what's happening particularly in the German market? Are we seeing speculative land banking, speculative build, expecting those kinds of things? But let's just pick up that smaller urban piece alongside the bigger box with you, Raimund.
I think, again, a good point with this instant gratification, and I think it was a developer, forgot who it was, but also on a panel he said last time his son, 7 years old, he went to the computer, ordered something, and then he went immediately to the front door expecting the postman is coming. So that's the kind of education what you have. So we made actually teased people, and now we have to deliver, so that because everyone is used, and next day is normal, and probably same day, it's an extra service almost required to deliver. But that means, of course, you need the infrastructure. Again, it's a bit more complex because you really have to distinguish between last mile carrier or the courier services. They have more the hubs or the spokes, the micro spokes inside the city. But at the same time, Andy also had it on the slide, and since this was one of my last projects with Amazon, the Dagelfing Amazon Fresh building. So that's the typical location when you deliver directly out of the spoke. That has to be in this kind of parameter close to the city where you can reach everything, and you don't use some spokes or sort centers in between. You just go directly to the customer. So that's some kind of bigger locations, 20 to 30,000 square meters or up to 400,000 square foot. And then you have smaller ones, and I guess there will be, and nobody has the answer yet, but it looks a little bit more like the 2,000 or 3,000 square meter buildings in the city to have smaller consolidation or micro hubs for the postal services or for DHL guys or Amazon logistics. And that's probably something, but again, that's something what I always like to add at this kind of conferences, that we still see, the world in the eyes as we are used to the world. And there probably in the next 10 years, much more changes what we can just imagine, what is going on. What happens, for example, with all these autonomous cars? So that's always the biggest topic for me. What does it mean? If it really comes to the point, does it really mean you just replace your private car by an autonomous car? But I don't think. Why would I do it? Again, looking at my kids, they're already a little bit older. They both have no car. The younger one just made the driving license 2 years later. But for me, impossible. I wanted to do it when I was 18, the first thing to do. And they just use, Car2Go, Drive Now, and Uber, and and that's probably with the autonomous cars. You will have this as a lift, and you have a decision whether you want to have your own lift in the black car, or you want to have a shared lift, and then you have optimized transportation. But why do I mention it? Because there's a huge impact on the infrastructure in the streets. You have 1.2 people in the car in the moment. What happens if you have suddenly 4 and you don't need them for parking? So it's a completely different picture. How you have to imagine the cities, the streets. So that will also have an impact. And to put this into your current planning is probably the biggest challenge. How can you assume the technique or imagine the technique in 10 years and build something what is sustainable for the next 10 years.
Okay.
Yes, many thanks, Raimund. I would like to add some research numbers, which are basically I have from John Sling LaSalle research pages. I'm not reading any competitive research, but only from you guys. Look at Northern Europe. The turnover logistics space we had in Germany last year nearby 8 million, in Netherlands 2 million. If you combine that, it's 10 million of square meters. That is bigger than the rest of Europe, including, unfortunately, UK, France, Spain and Italy and any other markets. Looking at Northern Europe at a glance, if you go from Rotterdam to Tilburg, Eindhoven, to the Ruhrgebiet area, that's what we are calling global hub. Global hub is where manufacturing are meeting people, are meeting logistics. And in that areas, we have vacancy rates from modern logistics space of nearby 0%. I think it's the same with the guys from Frasers, I think it's the same with you guys from Logicor. And because of that makes us very strong in beliefs in being a speculative developer in Germany and in the Netherlands as well. I can really claim that any development we are doing speculative at the moment in Germany and in the Netherlands is, before it's completed, it's stabilized. And more often better than underwritten. So no, that is what we see as really as good for us as a developer, and we will do a lot of stuff in that as well. You need for that financial power, because land banking is always, as we know, no, from the last financial crisis, a little bit of Russian roulette. Is that the right place you are in, or is that maybe you have that for the next 10 years, and then you have put equity in that side, and equity has unfortunately no return then, because you have no cash on cash. So in summary, I think we see in total still, in comparison to pre-Lehman crisis, a very, very low rate of speculative scheme, but that will be increasing because of not only us, I think the other developers has success rate as well. It will be increasing. If you have a modern standard warehouse in the Stuttgart area, for example, the industrial heartland of Germany, I think it's a low-brainer. No? You can get at least with excellent credit governance of the tenant, and that's good for everybody's benefit.
Andy, I just wanted to pick up with you a question that's also come in, which is around pricing levels. I mean, you're talking about the multi-story ones and these urban logistics centres. Do you see that the pricing levels for those will be different to big box? How do you see that? Because obviously they've presumably got to compete with other sectors, whether that's residential, hotels, retail, office space within inner city locations.
Yes, very, very good question. Certainly in these urban areas and these city areas, where, and I have to say in London, developers are now being encouraged, and indeed there are planning guidance that are insisting on the industrial logistics offering on a site is intensively built. So there's some examples. I mentioned Park Royal, which is northwest of London. There's a couple of sites there which have planning briefs on them, and they dictate multi-level. You can't just build standard industrial warehouse, single-story stock. And through that, when you start doing the numbers, it triggers. As long as you're confident you're going to let the space and you're going to let it at good rents, it's triggering substantially increased land values. And what we're now finding is that the residential market in London has been hot for quite a while. There's been a little bit of slowing down in that market. I think there's a lot of stock coming through, and in those key located areas in the city and in the urban fringes, the industrial developers are now getting very close or even improving on resi values, and that is really due to how many floors can you actually build in terms of multi-level, and the rents that are now in place in London. Going back, just to give you an example of where rents sit in London, to give you an idea on the ultimate sort of residual land value that is being created. Back in the last peak, rents in London hit £12.50 a square foot. Sorry, I need to convert that to square metres, but apologies. We're now, at this moment in time in London, hitting £24-25 a square foot for the same product. So it's moved on. And one of the main reasons for that is that there has been a huge increase in demand from the sectors that we've just been talking about. And London is now operating at around about 3, maybe 4% void. So there are, to be perfectly honest, there is very, very little choice for the occupier now. So of course, rents it's getting competitive. I showed that slide with the e-commerce and the retailers or whatever, but all those other uses as well, who also need to service their customers close to the big areas of the population, the populace. So there's a moment when everyone is competing for those final buildings. That's why I'm very, very confident that you're saying Ingo, about your success in terms of spec building and letting it. I wonder, if you start, building multi-level, where are we going to still see that same amount of demand? I certainly in London, I'm advising our clients at the moment that they should be building multi-level as long as it is well specified, as long as it isn't over compromised and it's in the right location. Then we will start to see lettings take place. So just go back to what you asked for. In terms of land values in London, where industrial can be built and can be built on an intensive basis, land values are increasing quite dramatically at the moment.
Okay, good. I just want to do one, it's not very scientific, but just in terms of everybody here, just by a raise of hands, how many of you expect to see multi-level facilities, urban multi-level facilities, let's say in the next 2 to 5 years across Europe? Okay, I'm reckoning that's about 60%. Looking at that, okay, that's interesting. Good, now carry on.
I think what we are seeing at the moment is multi-story warehouses. The first multi-story warehouses, it's not last mile logistics, are the e-fulfillment centers, which we are doing. And the first time in the latest history, we see that Asia is the runner here. No? They show us how warehouse development should look like, or there is already in your countries. No? I think we are proud that we have now somebody here from India, Indospace, GLP acquired Indospace. We are now developing as well warehouses in India. I think in the region of Mumbai and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I've never been in India, only flying over it. But I think multi-story warehouses will be there as well, like we have seen in Hong Kong, like we have seen in other places. No?
You've come all the way from India.
Yes. Okay. I represent Indospace India, and the interesting part is that we already, as Indospace, have got multi-story warehouse in 2 locations in India, while we are quite well spread across India. But we have multi-story warehouse in Bangalore, which is doing quite well. It's 100% leased out. And we have come up with multi-story warehouse in Pune, and we are in the stage of leasing that out as well. So I think it's doing well, and I think with the e-commerce thing coming up, people want to be near the market, so there's more demand in 4 metros specifically, where we are trying to do some transactions. So I think there's a huge demand.
Great, thanks very much for that. I want to leave plenty of time for you to be able to also have kind of private conversations with the speakers afterwards. So there's just a few things that I want to really pick up in the next kind of 5-10 minutes before we finish, which is then just looking at some of the things that Andy brought out in the presentation, but also really looking towards the future. I've got a fabulous question here that took me a little time to work out, which was, what about space for logistics space? So that really, I think, is looking further into the future, but I like the bold message of it. Just, Andy, how far, when you're doing, because obviously you're consulting with, I guess, both logistics companies as well as real estate owners, as well as the capital looking to invest. How far ahead are people looking in terms of what you should be designing in now? You mentioned wellness, you mentioned those kinds of things, proximity to power, you mentioned, and we can come to that. How far ahead are you looking? Are you looking ahead 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Are you looking at space?
I think one of the major issues and the major considerations when we are talking to our clients is sort of future-proofing these buildings. So just going back to Singapore, the really interesting thing about Singapore is that the government grants 30-year leases to the developers to crack on and build their multi-storey building. So when I went there about 15 years ago, and it wasn't in its infancy, but there was quite a lot of sort of relatively redundant space. But what they've managed to do, because they're re-churning their space on a 30-year rolling basis, they're always redefining what is best practice. So like the Toll Group building, which I went to see, that is absolutely fabulous, and that is I think a real state-of-the-art building. So I'm trying to relay that to my UK clients, but things that really are of major consideration, and I know that Raimund has mentioned it already, is robotics, automation. How do we actually genuinely design buildings to accommodate the future, although it's here now, but it's evolving all the time. I mean, I've been all around the trade fair, and there's loads of innovation, there's loads of really exciting things that are going on, which they're probably in their infancy, but how do we factor them into the building? So it's things like, really basic things like availability of power. And, one of the huge problems that we have in the UK is number one, getting the local, the utilities companies to actually be able to give us some feel as to how much power is available, and how do we actually reserve it for 10 years' time when all of a sudden a building is being repurposed and it's going to be almost fully automated. So that's a real consideration at the moment. I think that the staff are going to be, your workforce are going to be far more discerning. I think their expectation for a better environment is really very important. So I think that there is going to be more of a need for those sort of amenities, which in theory is a bit of a almost at the moment a bit of a lost leader. So providing 200 square meters of your space, for a gym or for a restaurant or whatever, which really could be utilised for your actual day-to-day business. I think it's quite difficult at the moment because we've never really had to do that before. But now, now there really is the need to properly think about your staff. We are in a different place now. And I think the other thing, just to say, my final thing is that, we've had the European elections recently. There's a lot of the green agenda is really going right at the top of importance now. And I don't think I think that everyone has taken it on board that we need to be more sustainable, but I think that we're now going to the next level now. So it's sustainability, but it's also looking after your staff a lot better and providing a much better environment. So I think there's quite a lot of things that we are going to be seeing factored into the buildings going forward. My biggest thing is power, and actually the other thing I should have said was being in close proximity to the labour force, which is a major issue, particularly in London at the moment.
I mean, and maybe just to pick up with you, Raimund, just on that topic as well, the sustainability angle on the green agenda, does that mean that electrification of vehicles is going to be much, much quicker, do you think? Does that mean you're going to get drones? Does that mean it's going to be more about cycle couriers rather than... how do you see that, and how are you looking at that for your business?
I think first of all, I'm really proud because it's very high on our agenda from Zalando, and overall also from a fashion perspective, that we really want to keep everything in the cycle, reuse everything, instead of putting it in the rubbish bin if it's not sold. So there's really a high focus on sustainability. The minimum is really to electrify, or with solar panels, that our buildings become quite independent. So that's a very important part. If you ask me about this, electrical cars, so that's just something that formed a little bit over the last 6 months. That you see, the more you think about it, I'm actually not sure whether that's the solution. If you really look into it, there was also a presentation last time about what you just. I think all the trucks in America, in the US, if you would bring them on power, what was it? It was 20% of the whole power of the US, what you would just need to load the batteries of these trucks. So the question is, there will be something, maybe it's also hydroxine or something, so I think probably there's something at the horizon what we also do not see yet. But there will be high pressure to do this. You know, I think the old fossil cars, they're probably the past, and you have to look how to optimize it. And also to your point, space for logistics or what it was, but I think how we have to see it, logistics is more and more a utility, you know, because the way we live, so we need our products right into the city. So you have to consider this a utility, and like a utility, we all have to work together to make it efficient. Yeah. And that's probably something that hasn't been talked about is all this, you know, the opportunities with blockchain, with 5G, that you can open platforms. You know, in the past it was always difficult for DHL and Hermes, for example, to work together because nobody wanted to open the books and telling somebody I have 20% capacity in my car. But if you do it like in an Uber way, nobody actually knows the actual capacity, just knows there is, for these 5 parcels, I can put them on the other truck. So there's a kind of it's called the physical internet, that you see it like you don't know how the products actually get to the customer, but they will find the way, always looking for a free spot. And these kind of things will probably drive the green agenda to optimize and efficiency in the system. And that's a responsibility of all of us, you know, the players in the market, authorities and planning authorities in the city to make this.
Yeah, I was kind of rethinking. So what is going to be the big change? And I think there is so many things happening at the same time that on a horizon, and if you're a long-term investor, I think, to be fair, I don't know how the world is going to look in 10 years. I might have an idea, but I'm probably wrong anyway. So I think for us, it's probably more to focus on the things that all of a sudden have or start influencing the real estate side that we didn't see coming. And for me, labor is probably the biggest one that no one really saw coming 10 years ago. And where people are will have a big impact on where the real estate is. So, and then the real estate will follow whoever needs to be there in whatever form it needs to be there, but it will only do so on new build. It can't change the existing situation. And I think the reality, if I look at our portfolio, we have existing buildings. And even if I look at the real generic numbers, like Ingo mentioned, I think we're building about 8% of our total stock new every year. So it's going to take us, per se, 10 years to catch up and completely renew everything, knowing that it's probably going to be wrong when we figure it out, because building and construction is something process-wise, and it takes time. You were very keen by saying it can take us 5 months. Real planning permission in Germany, provided you have the right use. Yep, you might be right, but if you don't have the right use, and by all means, we don't know what is going to be the right use, it's going to be 10 years. So by the time we figured out what it is looking today and we start implementing it, and that was your story, in basically the same story for, you're experimenting, learning, doing it, and then you're finding it out, to find out that once you build it, it only solves one problem in one building, but the other 99% of the buildings, or 92% of the buildings, is still in an old-fashioned way. So I think that's, for me, the real important thing. We focus on what are the big changes that we don't know yet or we don't think of yet that will have a big impact. And therefore, yes, labor to me is the one that was the biggest surprise, and that's going to drive our locations. And locations will be the ones, and then we find a solution, whatever it is. We're going to...
Yeah, and it's interesting because originally, having these discussions before, people were talking about that labour would not be an issue because everything would have moved on to robotics, and so there would be a big change. And actually, what would you do with all of the labour? And actually, that view has changed completely. We're almost out of time, so I've only got one last question, which is, you mentioned that if we look into the future, we're almost certain to be proved wrong. So I thought we'd test that. If we're kindly invited back again to do this same discussion and look at the future or look at these topics again in 2 years' time at Transport Logistics, so in 2021, what do you think will have been the changes, so that then when you come back again, we can find out whether they are? I'll remember this, we'll note it down, and we can test it. Andy, biggest changes in the next 2 years?
Firstly, I'll be taking my wife to India to have a look at the multi-story warehouses. I'm bound to say this, but I think we're going to see some of my developer clients actually here showcasing their new multi-story schemes, which are going to be starting on site. I think that there might be a couple which will already be up and being built. I think you're going to see, and I know that. Buddy and Ingo have very good relationships with their customer base, but I think you're going to see even closer knit relationships between those key developers and those key occupiers. And I think that I was very interested. There's a stand round the corner. I think it's called Retail. I think they're called, who are the electric. Bikes, but they're actually with a parcel sort of compartment behind. I was really interested in those, and also Paxter, another operator. I think we're going to be talking a lot more about those types of that last mile delivery in the cities, utilising those electric. We're not just electric vehicles, but electric powered by people on bikes. I think that's going to be something that it could be commonplace in our cities, in the next couple of years.
Okay, good. Ingo.
Yes, I think in the next 2 years we will see again something like a sold-out situation in the northern part of Europe, for example, where we need really to look how we can be more in relationship with municipalities to buy more land banks to serve our customers. I think the major part of logistics development will still be the big box business, because that's a very scalable business, and the advantage of big box developments is always that you can do a lot of things in this building. So you're covering with a big box business. I think I see a Goodman guy here sitting here. No, I think big box business, 80 or 85% of the occupier likes the big box business, and you need to make sure that your big warehouse developments are future-proof. The future-proof means, I think Jeff Bezos has now mentioned that drones will starting in US, maybe in Europe as well. We look at the spec development, for example, that the capacity of our roofs are prepared for that. It could be that is a trend, that drones are allowed to fly into the cities, for example. What can you do? The capacity of the roofs is more or less better. You need to speak with the municipalities that you get permit for that. So you need to look at the supply chain, how this is the evolutional trends, and you need to look at the building specs. Battery storage, battery charging, for example, when the Teslas are coming, is your truck part, is that prepared for that, for example? Can somebody like Kühn + Nagel, who may have Mercedes trucks which are battery charged, can we have that kind of spec in our buildings? That will have a massively change, and I think with our head of construction, that is Graham Muno, we are looking at a project named Cherry, and that is where we're looking how we can adapt that spec from the logistics in our real estate spec. That is, I think, the major trend for us.
Okay, good, buddy.
I like to hope that in 2 years from now, the last mile service providers, as the parcel providers, have decided to reduce the number of cubic meters of air they drive through the cities by combining this. And I think we're probably looking at some first legislation by cities actually bombarding operators to do that. Thank you, and the music actually works. So thank you.
It sounds as though you're the winner, buddy.
Yes.
First prize. Yeah.
Someone. So that's. I think it's not necessary. I think that is going to change.
Okay.
That is the biggest change.
Great, Raimund.
I hold it a little bit with Bill Gates, who said, we completely overestimate what can happen in 1 year, but we underestimate what happens in 10 years. And so in 2 years, probably we are still in the deceptive phase. We will sit back. Multi-story definitely will come, so I fully agree. City logistics will play a bigger role. more and more automation. But I still think we will be in a phase that we think it's continuous, like it has continued over the last 10 years, but they are just still under the surface, and suddenly, maybe in 5 years, they come out. So for me, that's always a message I always bring at every conference. I think you know this. For me, the big thing is in 10 years, that's my bet. Now it's 9 years, but I have a bet running, saying, in 10 years in cities like London, Paris, in the high density cities, there will be no private car anymore. So it's just autonomous driving. So, and that's something what I'm working towards, because that's going to happen from my perspective. I don't have the crystal ball, but I think in 2 years will be not so much. But we should not be proven wrong thinking that's it, because it will continue under the surface.
Okay, great. Thank you.